Charles E. Smith. I'm Natalie West, Chair-elect of Charles E. Smith Life Communities. I'm pleased to serve as MC and moderator this evening, along with my colleague, Allison Barrett. Allison and I serve on the Board of Governors for Charles E. Smith Life Communities, and Allison is Vice Chair of the Resource Development Committee. For those who may not be familiar with Charles E. Smith Life Communities, our organization has been serving older adults in our community for 111 years. We started in a row house in DC in 1914, and since 1969, we've been on this beautiful campus in Rockville, Maryland. We serve more than 1,100 adults in a variety of residences, including independent living at Ring House and Revitz House, assisted living at Landau House, memory care at Cohen Rosen House, nursing home care at Hebrew Home, and short stay rehabilitation care at the Slavin Post-Acute Care Center, which was just awarded the U.S. News and World Report Best Short-Term Rehab designation, which is the highest possible rating for the third year. To learn more about our services, please visit our website at smithlifecommunities.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Amy Argetsinger is an editor of the Washington Post Style section. A staff writer since 1995, she authored the Post Reliable Source column for several years before becoming an editor in 2014. Amy's new book, There She Was, charts the evolution of an American institution alongside the country's changing ideas around gender, race, feminism, and beauty. At the same time, it is a warm and captivating look at the friendships between the women who have indelibly come to define American femininity, an unlikely sisterhood that has kept the pageant alive for a century. As an aside, I'd like to say how much I enjoyed the Reliable Source column. For many years, many years ago, I actually had the honor of being included in it, Amy. In 1999, we had the pleasure of having Joan Rivers speak at our mini luncheon. And we were featured right there in the Post with Joan. It was an unexpected treat to wake up and see that. So welcome, Amy. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm very, very glad to be here.
Amy, to begin, can you tell us about your experience as a fan of the pageant? Like many of us grew up watching it as well. And what made this so compelling to you to decide to write about the history of Miss America? Can you tell us about your research for the book and how you were received by some of the former Miss Americas?
Well, I should tell you, I'm a child of the Beltway. I grew up in Alexandria, which is not exactly the pageant belt. I did not grow up around pageants. I watched it, but I watched it like we all watched it. It was the show that was on when we had 3 or 4 channels to watch. Right. I didn't really start watching it until I was in middle school because it started so late at night. It was really kind of off limits for littler kids who might have been swept up in the whole princess drama. Part of what got me into it, honestly, was growing up here and being a reader of the style section. The style section historically, I wouldn't say they treated Miss America seriously, but they gave it serious attention. For years, they would send their best feature writers. It was like a writing contest, and they really delved into the anthropology, the sense of competition, the drama, the controversy. And the first stories I remember reading about it that really blew me away were by Tony Kornheiser, of all people, later much better known as a sports writer, but sports writers get it. They understand like the dynamic of competition and drama. So because of the Washington Post's coverage, I always sensed that there was something more going on here, that this was a really interesting subculture. What ultimately got me into it, though, was moving to Iowa. I started my career in Davenport, Iowa. Iowa is the pageant belt. Not only did you see beauty queens walking around on the street, one of my own colleagues who was a journalist, a young reporter alongside me, she actually entered the Miss Clinton County, Iowa pageant. And this was fascinating to the rest of us. And then 2 years later, when she and I were both living in DC, we decided that we would we would drive to Atlantic City and see this thing for ourselves. And once you do that, then you realize that there's this whole universe, there's this whole scene, this subculture going on that you never really glimpse on television. And that's really what got me hooked.
That is fascinating. So then you wrote an article and it got Simon and Schuster's attention. Is that what happened?
That's right. Yeah, I had written about Miss America here and there, but I'd never really, I hadn't done a whole lot on it. But in 2018, this pageant organization was really in crisis. It was caught up in a civil war that was triggered in part by the decision to get rid of the swimsuit competition. This is when Gretchen Carlson, the former Fox anchor, and herself, Miss America in 1989, she had taken over. Her leadership had turned out to be very, very divisive, caused a lot of tension. And I wrote a story about this. And I got a phone call after that from Simon and Schuster, who said, "Do you think there might be a story in this?" And they had looked it up and realized that the centennial was coming up, which was this year. And I thought about it, and I thought, I'd always wanted to write a book. And I thought, yeah, I think I can do this. And that began my journey with the Miss Americas. I spent a lot of time talking with most of the surviving women who wore the crown, but I also spent a lot of time with the young women who were on the 2019 competition circuit, who were competing in these small town pageants that went up to the state pageant and then to Atlantic City. So I saw both sides of it, all sides of it, really.
Hi, Amy. Can you talk a little bit more? I somehow got muted again. I don't know how much of that you heard, so I'm going to ask again.
Try again. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the issues surrounding when Gretchen Carlson took over the pageant in 2017 and what was going on? And can you also maybe share a little bit about Gretchen Carlson for those who are not familiar?
Yeah. 2017, you'll remember, that's the beginning of the Me Too movement. And throughout media and politics, we were all of a sudden hearing accusations and claims and about prominent men, but also a larger debate about how women, particularly young women, were treated in the workplace and in society in general. That was the backdrop that led to the leaking of some very, very damaging emails that were written by the then head of Miss America and exchanged with some members of his board. This is not a sexual harassment claim. This is not a sexual harassment crisis, but it was, he had spoken in very vulgar and demeaning and arguably sexist ways about some of the former Miss Americas. And once this got out, it created an uproar, a total outrage. All the Miss Americas, the former Miss Americas, banded together and they demanded his resignation. They demanded the resignation of the entire board, and they got it. And in that vacuum, a group of Miss Americas stepped up to take over the board. It seemed at the moment that it was going to be a very triumphant thing for the organization. It seemed very exciting. Oh, the Miss Americas are taking over Miss America. And there is something sweet about that they felt so strongly about maintaining the good name and preserving and working for this organization. It ended up being very contentious. The head of the board then in early 2018 was Gretchen Carlson. She was Miss America in 1989. At the time, she really kind of broke the mold for Miss Americas. She was a student at Stanford. She had been a violin prodigy who had won national competitions. She was very intense, very brainy. She didn't particularly love being Miss America, from what I was able to tell reading her memoir. She didn't really care for the scrutiny, the attention. It was not something there is something that was not, a lot of Miss Americas love being Miss America, and I don't know that she did, but she had strong feelings about the organization, as they all did. And one of the first moves she made in 2018 was to lead a push to get rid of the swimsuit competition. Once again, this was something that seemed like a very triumphant move, a kind of victorious movement. A lot of people thought, why do you have a scholarship competition that involves competing in swimsuits? I mean, that's a pretty good point to make. But the change was made very, very quickly. And in its wake, there was a lot of dissension from the large volunteer network, the pipeline that kind of bolsters Miss America by organizing these small town pageants and state pageants that go on to Atlantic City. And it became a very kind of tumultuous period where some Miss Americas resigned from the board. Other board members were, I would say, pushed off the board by Gretchen because they had publicly dissented with her. It was a very ugly, contentious period. At the end of which the reigning Miss America publicly complained, went on television to complain that Gretchen Carlson had bullied her. It was a very distressing chapter in the history of this kind of close-knit organization, and I would say that it really hasn't recovered from any of that turmoil.
I can understand there's so much confusion about that. And it would be interesting to even know how many Miss Americas were disappointed that the swimsuit competition was taken away.
It felt like a generational thing to me. When I talked to people, it seemed like, and this is where you kind of get into how the organization changed, how the women who won had changed. In the 1960s, most of the Miss Americas were college girls and young ones at that. They were 18 or 19 years old. They had kind of fallen into this. They hadn't spent a whole lot of time competing. They kind of had, they didn't think too much about the swimsuit competition. It was like, well, I'm wearing my swimsuit just like I would to the beach. Kind of wasn't a big deal. And they kind of, most of them sort of after they'd been Miss America, they went back home. They married their boyfriends, they finished college. Most of them did not go on to big careers. In the 1970s, you started having older Miss Americas. They were baby boomers who had kind of more of a competitive spirit. They had tried year after year to become Miss America before they finally clinched it. Many of them were trying to follow in the footsteps of Phyllis George, Miss America 1971, who was the first of them to have a really big, significant television career. But sort of towards the end of the 70s and into the 80s, the whole swimsuit thing had become so big. A lot of these women were on like 800 calorie a day diets to try to look right in their swimsuits. It was a very unhealthy pursuit at that point. And I found that those women, they had very unhappy feelings. When they looked back, they resented, they did not like that swimsuit competition. Then in the later 80s and into the 90s, you had a generation of contestants who had really devoted themselves to fitness. It's when gym bodies became the thing. And honestly, those women tended to have warmer feelings about the swimsuit competition. It was a sense of accomplishment, like, yes, I'm so proud of this body that I've built for myself. But what you also had to happen was that this entire world was shrinking. By the time we got into, this new century, many, many fewer women were competing for Miss America. And as a consequence, anyone who was competing for Miss America was basically a population that had bought into this. If they didn't like swimsuits, they would have gone and done something else. Right. So there were many young women I talked to, who didn't feel liberated by the end of the swimsuit competition. They felt like something was being taken away from them. Something that they were good at was no longer in their part of their toolkit. It was very surprising to see those changes.
That is fascinating. You cover so much ground in your book, Amy. It's remarkable. I'm going to actually go backwards for a second and take you back to 1945.
My book goes back and forth a lot too.
It's wonderful. It's such a great read. I really enjoyed it. Going back to 1945, when Bess Meyerson was crowned as the first and only Jewish Miss America. Yeah. That was an interesting time for a Jewish winner. Can you share a little bit about what was going on then? And in her crowning?
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it shouldn't be much of a secret or a surprise that Miss America and pageants in general were fairly bigoted organizations. Um, there were rules about who could compete. There was a very specific rule called Rule 7 that prohibited Black women. Well, I think the rule was specifically all contestants must be of good health and of the white race. It was actually spelled out in the rule book that way. For some years, the organization would require its contestants to trace their family tree back for several generations. I mean, it had this kind of constant quest for respectability that would lead to a culture of outright snobbery. And then along comes Bess Meyerson. If you've ever seen any picture of the women competing in 1945, you see a group photo of them, your eye goes instantly to Bess Meyerson, even if you don't know who she is, because she was staggeringly beautiful and just all the charisma in the world. She was also very smart. She was going to college. She was a very good pianist and a very serious young woman. There are no specific rules against Jews in the contest. However, when she was competing, Lenora Slaughter, who was the head of the Miss America organization, obviously had realized that Bess was a contender and pulled her aside to suggest that maybe she should change her name to something that sounded a little less Jewish. Bess refused to do this. I mean, she was proud of who she was. She said something to the extent of, if I win, I want everyone in my parents' building to say, oh, that's the Meyersons girl. And of course, this was also the end of World War II. We were just beginning to come to terms with what had been going on in Europe. We were only beginning to grasp the Holocaust. And so her victory was a very emotional, cathartic thing for the Jewish community. It was huge. She became an instant celebrity in that world, but not for everyone. It wasn't just the Miss America pageant. It was the society we had. Miss Americas had typically been kept very busy by the pageant's sponsors, who would want to take her on tour, endorse in whatever product they were selling. A lot of the sponsors for Miss America really turned their back on her. They didn't use her at all, which she recognized that as the slight that it was. And she took matters into her own hands. She decided that she was going to find better use of her time as Miss America. She went on a speaking tour with Anti-Defamation League, talking about anti-Semitism. And she, of course, was a galvanizing speaker. And she also had her eyes open, going around as Miss America and seeing what it was like in the South. She was turned away from some parties and events. And it opened her eyes. It made her this advocate. And that really launched her career. That kind of gave her the gravitas, the training to become a television personality, which then led to her doing corporate work, which then led to her political career in New York City. A very, very impressive woman. And a lot of that was prompted by her Miss America experience, good and bad.
Yeah, she talked about how that was a launching pad for her activism, and that was probably true for a lot of Miss Americas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, later on, it actually became an official part of the Miss America job. Starting in the 90s, they had to take on causes and go out and talk about it, whether it was homelessness or AIDS or education. But Bess Meyerson was really a forerunner by 4 decades.
Wow. The last Miss America pageant was held in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what's happening for 2022 and where you see
Well,
this going?
yeah, all pageants were shut down last year, including the state pageants. 2019 was already kind of a strange year. They left Atlantic City after realizing they couldn't, it was expensive to do a pageant in Atlantic City. And so they moved to the Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. And they moved it from September to December, which kind of lost a bit of its fun beach vibe, as you can imagine. And then shortly, a couple months later, the pandemic hit, and that shut down this entire pageant cycle. And they're only just now getting it together again. This is its 100th year, but I have to say that the sense of a centennial has been very much muted. There's still a lot of rifts in the pageant world. The organization, I think, is running out of money. And this year's pageant will be held a week from today. And it's not going to be on network television. It's not even going to be on cable. It will be streamed via NBC's Peacock, but it's not getting a whole lot of marketing. And I think a lot of the Miss Americas that I talk to are coming to terms with the fact that this era may be coming to an end. Just from what I've seen, it's the finances are not great. The business model is not there. But you still have, if you follow any of this stuff, all of the Miss States are still turning out. They're all showing up in Connecticut now and getting ready to do all the preliminary competitions. And you still have that kind of same spirit of excitement. But I can't help but feel like it's all coming to a close soon.
So when you talk about the Miss States getting ready for their pageants, is that for the next cycle?
No, I mean they're all going for, they're all, they're arriving there now.
Got it. Sorry.
They will have the things you don't see on TV. There's several nights of preliminary competitions that decide who will be the finalists that you do see on TV. So they have, a chance for all 51 of them compete in their talents, and all 51 of them compete in their onstage interviews. And really there's a behind the scenes interview that the judges do. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of the decisions get made. If you ever watched Miss America and you think, oh, we're watching the talent and the swimsuit and the evening gown, and it kind of fools you into thinking this is how it all gets decided. And then you get to the end and you think, why her? Where did she come from? Every single time, it's because she gave a really good interview, and you don't see that on television. Those decisions really get made behind the scenes. That's where the special sauce is all on display.
It would be such a shame to see 100-year-old tradition just kind of go away.
I know the timing is kind of crazy, but it's not entirely Miss America's fault. Obviously, I think that there was some bad management decisions, but it's also just changing times. I mean, I started off writing this book thinking I was going to explain the rise and fall of Miss America. What happened, what went wrong, and then the more I looked at it, I thought, well, this is kind of amazing that it lasted this long. Name another pop culture icon or brand from the 1920s that is still vibrant and relevant today, other than Mickey Mouse. There really isn't it. It's Mickey Mouse and Miss America. And that's, tell me if I'm forgetting something, because I use this line a lot. Correct me if I'm missing anything. But it's funny. I was midway through my research, I found myself looking up a newspaper story from 1976 that was talking about the amazing ratings that Miss America had. Something like 60 million people had watched it. And the author of this story noted very rightly, well, of course, you have to admit, the pageant had a very good lead-in from the Perry Como Labor Day in Las Vegas special that preceded it. For a moment, I just stopped. I'm like, what am I doing here? Because it's like a Perry Como special. And I had to realize, how am I even wondering why Miss America has fallen when it's a relic of variety show culture? I mean, it was a hit TV show in the 50s, and it's no small miracle that it was still a TV hit in the 70s. And you think about it, it's like, well, of course it's no longer going to be popular. Nothing lasts forever. But, again, there's, I feel like I'm always trying to tell the pageant people, listen, it's a TV show and it's going to rise and fall on that business model. But, it always was a little more than a TV show, especially for the people who are deeply involved. And those are the people I feel sad for.
Yeah. Well, they did pave the way for reality TV that's taking over.
Yes,
right?
it was the first reality TV show, hands down, no doubt about it.
Do you think that there could have been anything done differently that wouldn't have led to the demise of the pageant? Have they made any missteps or?
People debate this. I think it's possible that if 20 years ago, someone had the foresight to see what was beginning to happen with reality television and had gotten ahead of it. If they had, the big reality TV basically took everything you like about Miss America and improved upon it. Miss America was just, it's just a one-night show. The great reality TV shows, they go on all season. They give you a drama to really get involved with. I think it's possible they could have done something where they put more of it on TV. They turned it into more of a series. They let you see more of the behind the scenes. At the end of the day, though, here we are 20 years past the dawn of this current era of reality TV. And does anyone know who the winner of the last American Idol was? American Idol completely ate Miss America's lunch. And yet American Idol is probably also in some kind of slow decline. I used to watch Survivor every week, and I haven't watched it in 15 years. Everything kind of runs its course. I will say it's very easy to sit here and say Miss America could have done this, should have done this, but Miss America was always going to have some inherent hurdles when it came to reality TV. This is a tradition-bound community. They want to do things like they've always done things. And, I don't think it's really in their DNA to dish up the kind of drama that you need in reality TV these days. They tried it. They tried doing a behind-the-scenes type thing where they had all the contestants in one house and all that. But, you're not going to get any catfighting drama from pageant girls. They're too nice. They're very well behaved. they don't want to do that.
Well, it's interesting. It would be sad for all the little girls who are still interested in pageantry, because certainly maybe not in the DC area, but many other parts of our country, it's very much part of their community's culture. And these kids grow, and there's a lot of good to take out of it. I can tell by the way you're sharing with us tonight that it really became a passion project for you to learn more about this Miss America and the history. And
it's a very absorbing world. It's a universe, and you end up getting into these late night online discussions with former Miss Americas or just fans who want to show you, oh, here's a YouTube from 1966, check it out, or who want to debate a certain rules change or whatever. It's and it's all kind of crazy, but everyone's hobby is kind of crazy. It's really no different than people who really throw themselves into, I don't know, March Madness or gardening or your Oscar pool. It's just one of the manifestations of our culture.
so what's next for you? Is there going to be another book?
Oh, I would love to write another book. I don't have, I'm open to ideas. I'm certainly looking for my next idea. I felt very lucky with this in that it was, it's a rich subculture, but it also had a lot of narrative arcs. I recognized that readers like a plot, they like suspense, and a pageant and the history of the pageant provided some of that. So I don't want to write another book about a pageant, but if you've got any other ideas for me, I love history. I love pop culture. I love real people and communities. And if I can find something that blends all that stuff, I'm all ears.
Well, I hope you do. Such good luck to you. Okay, Amy, if it's okay with you, now we're going to open up some questions for our Zoom audience because I've been watching. There are a lot of people have a lot to say. So yes, please, audience on Zoom, please load your questions onto the chat, either for everyone or for Robin. And
so you'll read them, or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Allison's going to take it away.
Yes, and actually, before we dive into those chat questions, I do have one more question.
Yes.
Can you talk about the famous crown and how do people feel about the crown and the relevance of the crown to the pageant?
The crown has been much debated in recent years. Back in the 90s, the pageant had a director who thought, oh, the crown is it's just a little tacky and weird, and we want people to take our Miss America seriously. So he would have them wear, business suits, and they would carry the crown and show it off, but they wouldn't walk into meetings with it on their head. Well, about 10 or 15 years later, they started wearing crowns again because people feel like, if you walk into a room without a crown, how does anyone know that you're Miss America? Or even on the lower level, I talked to, Miss Roanoke Valley, and she would talk about, she'd put a crown on her head, and no one knows who Miss Roanoke Valley is. No one knows what Miss Roanoke Valley is. But if she would go into an event with a crown or go into a school with a crown, like, people sit up and take notice. It's like, especially kids. And it kind of would give you this weird kind of aura, this kind of authority. Of course, I have a crown of my own. This was gifted to me by one of the Miss Americas who I interviewed for the book, who has become a friend. And she sent it to me, and my first reaction was, oh, wow. My God, I can't, right. Can I accept this gift? And she's like, oh no, it's not my crown. I ordered it off of eBay. Because pageant women, they have a lot of crowns. It's like, think about it. It's like, if you were Miss America, you don't just have your Miss America crown, you have your Miss Ohio crown, and you have your Miss Mahoning Valley crown. And multiply that by every year that you competed. So they use these crowns like, and they're rhinestone, they're not diamond. They use these crowns like, for centerpieces for parties, like, or they'll put the, the chips and dip in the middle of the crown. So I aspire to do that someday if we ever get out of the pandemic.
Sounds great. I think it's Susan Grodsky, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. She asks, now I lost my train. She says, Hillary Friedman in her book about Miss America says that the contestants wanted the scholarship money. And what are your thoughts on
She said that the scholarship.
What are your thoughts on the scholarship component?
And the scholarship thing is huge for Miss America. And I'm glad you read Hillary's book. It's quite good. I loved it because she's a sociologist, which is a different discipline than me. So I learned a lot. It was good. The scholarship is a big thing. It's part of what helped elevate Miss America. They started that in the 1940s. And of course, this is also part of the culture of snobbery, I have to say. Lenora Slaughter, the director, thought, if we have scholarships, we can get a better class of young girl. But it really did become a part of the brand and the mission. I don't think anyone does it for the scholarships. Scholarships certainly haven't kept up with the price of higher education. And some of the women who are competing, they're done with college. They don't need, actually, I interviewed one young woman who was competing, who was a midshipman at the Naval Academy. I mean, there's someone who does not need a scholarship. She's taken care of. But, at the same time, I did talk to others who really financed a lot of their education through this. But yeah, it's part of the brand. It's what set it apart from something like Miss USA or some other more fly-by-night pageant.
Okay. I'm worried I'm going to say this person's name wrong. Vicky Yuko, I can see you. She says everybody in the country was very touched and in love with Miss America when she was the deaf candidate. And she spoke at one of Vicky's agency's conferences. Can you talk about that story?
Heather is the Miss America who gave me this crown. She's wonderful. Heather Whitestone. She was Miss Alabama, and yeah, she was the first and last Miss America to have a disability or hearing impairment. She wore a hearing aid, but in 1994 when she won, I mean, it was a very moving moment. When they called her name, she couldn't hear it, and she couldn't. Regis Philbin was reading it out. She couldn't get a good look at him to read the lips. Her first runner-up had to point to her and say, "It's you. You're the winner." I mean, it was a magical reality TV moment to see that happen live. Yeah, and she's a very, very ingratiating person. I wrote in the book, and I told her this too, that it's in some ways her hearing impairment is part of what enhanced her appeal. And I don't mean because people felt sorry for her or because they wanted someone with a disability. No, it's because of her hearing impairment, she always had to work a little harder. She always, when you talk to her, she is listening to you so intensely because she's looking at your eyes, she's looking at your lips. She has to make more of an effort than most of us to keep up with a conversation. And this manifests in a way that you feel, wow, this person is putting their attention on me. It works on a very subliminal level, but that's part of her intense personal charm. And she's also just a lovely person. She really found herself by being Miss America. She had been a little bit isolated as a girl, as a teenager. She missed out on a lot of social life because she missed a lot of the social cues. But being in pageants really kind of put her in touch with, she found her people, her network of young women who were like-minded. She's one of those people, and she's been very upset with what's happened with the organization just because it meant so much to her. But yeah, that was a big deal. It was a very big deal when she was crowned. It was at the beginning of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was a real breakthrough.
Did she have an interpreter? I don't remember.
No, she didn't. She relied on reading lips and on hearing aid. She has since had cochlear implants, but still her hearing is not perfect.
I remember watching that. That was very emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very emotional. It was yeah, and she's just absolutely ingratiating person.
Somebody had asked early on, I'm trying to find it, had asked about what were the emails and what exactly was that all about?
The email, yeah. The director of the organization then was a man named Sam Haskell, who had been a pretty big deal Hollywood player. He was a very high-ranking agent at William Morris. But he also he was deeply rooted in pageant culture. He had grown up in Mississippi. His wife was a former Miss Mississippi. He'd been around the scene. And in many ways, he was sort of the perfect person to take over Miss America at that time because he had the show business savvy at a time when they were always at risk of losing sponsors and falling off of network television. But he was a big personality, complicated guy. And he had been, there were a lot of financial strains and stresses on the organization at the time. There's a lot of, a lot of back channel unhappiness, and he would vent to some of his favorite friends on the board. It was just really bitchy stuff. The C word was used on one occasion. He would talk about Miss America's who he thought had gotten fat, things like that. I mean, it's just kind of the ugliest, the kind of emails you hope you never get caught with your name on. And it was not a survivable scandal because this is an organization that, listen, a lot of us have worked for companies where colleagues trash talk each other behind their backs, but this is Miss America, and Miss Americas are put on a pedestal in this culture. And so to hear him trash talk a former Miss America, that was just not sustainable, not survivable.
And also, why was Bert Parks removed as the MC?
Bert Parks. Everyone here remember Bert Parks?
Right.
Oh, this is in let's see, 1979, 1980. I guess early 1980. Bert Parks had been the master of ceremonies for 25 years, and he was a old showbiz veteran. His skills had been honed in radio, the early days of radio. Really hammy guy, very smarmy, but kind of hilarious. His skills were perfect for commanding a huge room like the Atlantic City Convention Center. But the TV sponsors, they just thought he was a little out of date, kind of hokey. They wanted something more youthful, more now. And Miss America let him go in the worst possible way. They didn't call him. They sent him a letter. The letter went to his house in Connecticut, but he was in Florida for the winter, so he didn't even hear about it until a reporter called him. And it was a huge news story. Oh my Lord. It's like you wouldn't, like, there was months of coverage over this. Johnny Carson had a shtick about this for weeks upon weeks. Bring back Bert. Yeah, it was huge. Yeah, kind of a sad story.
Sometimes this is confusing for people. What is Miss America versus Miss USA? And then what progresses to Miss Universe? And what's going to happen if we don't have a Miss America? Confusing.
Good question. Miss America, Miss USA. Part of Miss America's problem over the last several decades is that no one knows the difference. Normal people, it's all the same to us, right? Miss America is the one that's turning 100. Miss USA is actually kind of an estranged cousin from Miss America, if that makes any sense. Miss USA was formed in 1950 when the new Miss America, Yolande Betbys, announced that she was not going to wear a swimsuit anymore in public. She was not going to pose in a swimsuit. Now, this was a big problem because the sponsor was Catalina Swimwear. And so they were left in the lurch. They were furious. They pulled all their funding from Miss America and they started their own pageant. And that was Miss USA, which then became part of Miss Universe. So Miss USA goes on to Miss Universe. And that's also the pageant that was owned for nearly 20 years, part owned by Donald Trump. And it's just two different cultures. If you ever turned on the TV, you can tell the difference between them pretty quickly. Miss USA is the one that's just a little sexier, a little flashier, bigger hair, bigger boobs, a lot more skin, no talent competition. Whereas Miss America is the one that was, scholarships and talent and all this talk about merit. And yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a big rift. In fact, you have a lot of women who finish up their time at Miss America and then go compete for Miss USA. There have been a couple of Miss USAs who had actually competed for Miss America. But culturally, in terms of the brand, is quite different. Not that normal people know, but yeah, that's the difference between the two.
Got it. You had briefly mentioned the Me Too movement earlier on in our discussions. Has the pageant had any connection to the Me Too movement? Any response?
Well, this is kind of the backdrop. I mean, of course, Gretchen Carlson was a big leader of the Me Too movement. She was the first woman to come forward with a complaint of sexual harassment against Roger Ailes, the very powerful founder of Fox News. And this led to his resignation, his entire downfall. And it was in subsequent months that you started to see a number of complaints, most spectacularly the Harvey Weinstein case. But a lot of that conversation was originated with Gretchen Carlson and Fox. It was kind of an awkward thing, though, when she was at Miss America. This was her new platform. She was moving to get rid of the swimsuit competition and talking about this in terms of a Me Too moment. And there are a lot of people in the pageant world who weren't comfortable with that. They're like, what does Miss America have to do with Me Too? This is not our cause. This is not our, not that they were opposed to it, but they kind of it sort of felt like it was a bit of mission creep, I guess. And that was part of the backdrop for some of the weird tensions that were going on that year. It's funny. I don't want to say that Miss America was always a squeaky clean organization and never had any problems or troubles, but you didn't hear the kind of scandals leak out of it in terms of sexual harassment that you did out of, say, Miss USA, where Donald Trump, the owner, was going backstage and ogling contestants. Miss America has always had, chaperones and this kind of, culture of putting her on a pedestal and this very earnest environment. Miss Americas are basically like never allowed to be in a room with a man, and these very old-fashioned kind of rules. But of course, we could talk about the Vanessa Williams scandal, which is a whole nother thing. But I'll let you go to your next question.
Okay. This is going to be our last question. And we were wondering, what was your favorite interview for the book? Who was your favorite person to interview?
Oh, that is tough. I think I might, listen, I love talking with Phyllis George. I'm so honored that I got to know her a little bit before she died. She died early last year. She and I never did the formal sit-down interview. We probably spent 10 hours on the phone, but never did that kind of formal interview. I was a woman I really liked was Miss America 1972. She actually succeeded Phyllis, Lori Lee Schaefer from Ohio. And what I liked about that interview is that she kind of opened my eyes to kind of a larger meaning with Miss America. I had sort of taken her to be, she was the very standard traditional Miss America. She had very conservative politics and, she was just very typical. She wasn't like Phyllis. She wasn't any kind of groundbreaker. But, talking to her, and I was asking her because, it was 1971, 72, and the media was always asking her about her political views, and she was anti-marijuana and she was pro-Nixon and all that. And that seemed to be a new thing that they were talking about this. And she said, well, I was the first Miss America to talk about this kind of stuff. I said, what? And I hadn't realized, but before her, Miss Americas are basically told not to talk about politics. There's, you got to no comment, you got to stay away from anything controversial. But, Lori was a baby boomer. She was a conservative, but she had strong beliefs. She felt very strongly about her conservative views. She was 22 years old, and she would not have called herself a feminist, but she was definitely empowered. So when reporters were asking her her political views, she was going to answer them, darn it. And to me, it kind of opened my eyes to something that was going on with Miss America through that era, and just how it could be a window into social change. So often we want to talk about the people who are at the vanguard of a social movement, who rightfully get that credit. But there's something kind of interesting about the people who are a little bit ordinary, who are just buoyed along by those social movements, whether it's someone like that who, she definitely wasn't going to be burning her bra or protesting the war, but she was waking up in a little ways and wanting to express her views in a way that young women hadn't been empowered to do before. And, it made her a more interesting Miss America than some of her predecessors. But the story she was telling kind of reminded me, some of the women in my own life, my mother or my aunts or something, and what their experiences were like in the 60s and 70s. And it just kind of opened my eyes to kind of a subtler story that could be told through the lens of Miss America.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. Amy, thank you for this entertaining and informative presentation. And just like Natalie said, I grew up watching Miss America. I'm sure many of the other people on this call were the same. And I had no idea about so many of the backstories and the history. And it was just so great to learn more about all of this. So thank you so much, Amy.
You all are welcome to email me if you have any other questions. My website is amyargetsinger.com. My email is amyargetsinger@gmail.com. I hope you buy the book. I hope you like it. I spend most of my nights replying to emails about it, so bring them on.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Best of luck to you. We've
you.
really enjoyed this, and I am still rooting for Miss America. That's
Tune in next week.
you.
For everyone attending, we are really happy to provide these programs free to the community. And as a local nonprofit organization, of course, we rely on community support. We appreciate any donations, and the link for that will be in the chat. And for information on upcoming programs, we're working on some exciting things for 2022. The website will be posted in the chat, and please check back often to see what we've got coming up.
Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.